Well, hello everyone, and welcome back. It's so great to see you, and happy Tuesday to you wherever you're joining us from. It is very, very busy day yet again. Today, the Dow closed up 526 points, and Nasdaq joined up 169 points, primarily because some of the retail numbers are looking positive, meaning that as Americans see cities and states slowly starting to open back up, people are going back and they're spending with their wallets and showing that they still have some buying power, which is an optimistic sign for those of you who are investors in this market. They're feeling like they're able to spend, therefore, perhaps just perhaps the economy isn't as in bad shape as it seems to be. Now, today I am excited because today is a very special day. I am joined with three incredible guests. This is going to be a discussion that I think you're really going to enjoy and probably stick with you. You know, I had an opportunity to meet with the one and only Kathleen from Gen Z at the Adobe Summit last year with our friends as Adobe Insiders, and she leads a group called Gen Z. And this is a group that many of you may or may not be familiar with. I know you've heard the term millennials. You know, we've heard about millennials forever. Gen Z is now the next generation, the younger generation from the millennials, and certainly a very, very exciting generation. I've had a chance to speak with some of individuals from this group, but let me tell you, that conversation that I had a chance to sit back and learn from them stuck with me. And I think this is going to do something for you as well. Those of you who are business owners, let me tell you, you're in for a treat, because if you hear what these young individuals will tell you and you use some of this knowledge to position your businesses and practices in the future, I think it's only going to be more insightful and interesting and helpful for you and your employees and your future customers and clients and everybody in between. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce three incredible Gen Zers to you. First off, I'm going to introduce, because I was just joking with him that we go way back, because we've actually had a great conversation before the pandemic on back to school shopping, the one and only Noah Laramore, who is 18 years old. He comes to us from Fishers, Indiana, and he's actually in the car right now. Hello, Noah. How are you? I think his screen got shot, but Noah is actually had a last minute doctor's appointment. So he's joining us from the car, but he describes himself as a nerd, an artist, a leader, and an activist. He's a rising freshman at DePaul University, majoring in animation with a minor in PR and advertising. He runs varsity track, cross country, and serves as the regional vice president of the Midwestern region of Jack and Jill, an organization promoting leadership and character in African American youth. And I'm very excited to also welcome his sister, Lydia Laramore, a graduating senior powerhouse at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, she's majoring in international studies with specializations in French and economics. Lydia, you do a little bit of everything for sure. This summer, Lydia is a communications intern at the software startup Safe2, creating technological exposure notification solution to mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic. That's incredible. When studying in Paris during fall of 2020, she completed an independent research seminar in which she wrote a 25-page paper explaining the high prevalence of Islamic terrorism in France. And on. So much more. So there's so much that I'm looking forward to learning from you, but let's give a quick introduction to the one and only Quinn McKenna, a rising sophomore and powerhouse at the University of Notre Dame. She is majoring in program of liberal studies, a major that strongly emphasizes literature and the humanities. Quinn also minors in education, schooling, and society. In high school, she was selected to participate in the renowned Cambridge University Scholar Program. Not only talented, but beautiful and very, very intelligent, Quinn was also the only member of her generation to be asked to speak on Gen Z and sports at the University of Notre Dame's Play Like a Champion Today National Conference for Educators and Coaches. Welcome, Quinn. Welcome, Lydia and Noah. It's such a treat to have all three of you joining us today. So let's talk I mean, I think this is something that many of us are curious about. We want to hear from you. Tell us if you can, in your own words, Lydia, talk to me about Generation Z. What age group is Generation Z? And maybe I'm going to let all three of you obviously get to this question, but I would like to hear from you what you think the major differences are between Gen Z and the millennial generation, the way you see it. Lydia, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So Generation Z is commonly looped in with millennials, just because millennials have kind of become a buzzword over the last couple of years. But Gen Z, I think the cutoff is 1995. So I am 99. So I'm kind of in that first early batch of Gen Zers. And it's until maybe mid 2000s. And aside from age, it really describes a generation that's grown up with technology and where technology has kind of infiltrated every part of our lives. And I think that means that we understand, interpret, and deal with data differently because we've had so much of it thrown at us from birth. So yeah, technological fluency, not by choice like the millennials had, but kind of birth is really the distinguishing mark, I think.
So age-wise, Lydia, about what age are you right now?
I'm 20.
20. So I think that they're saying I think that they said the youngest Gen Zer is around 10 or 11 years old, right? Going up to age 21, maybe 21, 22.
Yes, I think so. That's right.
Does that sound about right? Oh, great. And Noah's here. Wonderful. And Quinn, so maybe you can touch upon this when you think about I've heard this opinion that Gen Zers and millennials, you definitely have some differences in opinion, right? And thought leadership is different. How has that experience?
I'm really sorry. I think you cut out, or something's going on with the sound.
Sure. Quinn, is that better?
Yes. Sorry. It sounded like an airplane or something.
No problem. No problem. So let's talk about Gen Zers versus millennials, right? I was in this session when I first met Kathleen with Gen Z, and I remember one of the Gen Zers said, "You know what? We don't think like millennials in this way." And I would love for you to share that with us a little bit because you are the next generation, the younger generation. Just like Lydia has said, is basically you've never known a world or a life without technology, right? What other differences do you think that are very distinguishing?
That's an interesting question. I think one word I would really use to describe our generation is passionate. Like whether it be about like our hobbies or what's going on in the world, I think we make a concerted effort to stay informed and stay up to date about what's going on in the world and form our own opinions, that sort of thing. But I also think connection is something really, really big for our generation because of the fact that we're like tech natives. We have this amazing ability like no other generation before from the time we were really little to really connect with others all around the world, regardless of location. We can FaceTime our grandparents in a different state, that sort of thing. So I definitely think connection and passion are two major components of like defining our generation, I guess.
Oh, so interesting, Quinn. So connections and passion. So let's talk about the connections. I feel like if that's the case, given where we're at with COVID, with the pandemic, right? And a lot of the things that were part of your college experience at Notre Dame were those in-person connections. And now you've completely had to move that and become remote, right? Do you feel like that's been do you feel like you transitioned better and more smoother than the opposite if you sort of weren't this tech native?
For me personally, I definitely struggled with that lack of like face-to-face interaction at the beginning of the pandemic because that's such a big part of like who I am. I guess like connecting with my friends face-to-face, that sort of thing. But the positive of being these tech natives is that we were already so familiar with FaceTime. It was easy to acclimate to Zoom classes, that sort of thing. So we still got to keep in touch, you know what I mean? But once this is all over, I'm definitely going to be much more grateful for that face-to-face interaction.
Absolutely. It's really interesting that you say that. And I think so many times, many of us are challenged because we're so used to doing things a certain way and being able to see and touch and talk to each other in person, and transitioning over. You would think that since you are tech native, that perhaps you would feel like, everything was normal, but then you do crave that in-person connection, which is interesting. And I would love to hear, Noah, how you feel about this. Noah, I was just joking earlier that you and I go way back because we've actually had a great conversation in the past, and I know you're back with us right now. And talk to me about like that in-personal connection right now. And actually, I can hear two phones on your side, so we might have to. Though, if you don't mind shutting off your phone, that might be helpful. It's for connection. All right. But that's okay. We will come back to you. So, let's talk about this. So, Quinn, let's talk about this real quick. So, how has the virus directly affected your lives, whether good or bad, would you say?
Well, at the beginning, I definitely felt myself like being very anxious and nervous about all the unknowingness, and kind of having to change like plans I had over the summer, whether that be internships or jobs or that sort of thing. But I definitely saw a transition once I accepted that kind of this was the new reality, and there really wasn't anything I could do to change my situation. I got more into hobbies. Like I started journaling much more than I had before, reading more, exercising more. And so it was also very nice to spend more time with my family, which was an opportunity I wouldn't have had otherwise because I would have been at school or traveling, that sort of thing. So I've definitely become more grateful, I guess, for this experience. Whereas at the beginning, I was definitely not having it. I was very frustrated, and yeah.
So, Quinn, so you go to school at Notre Dame. So you usually go to school out of state. So talk to me about sort of the fall. Are you going back to school? Are you going to be continue to attend classes remotely? What does school look like for you at the end of this year?
So our president recently came out with like the agenda, I guess, for what next semester will look like. And we're starting classes August 10th. And then we have to move in 2 weeks to 1 week before. But they're going to be rearranging classes so that there are 6 feet of space between each student. We're going to be wearing face masks everywhere besides our rooms. However, just today, actually, a petition went out from some professors and students saying that students and teachers should have the option whether or not to learn in person, remotely, or a hybrid of the two. So there's still a little bit up in the air, so it'll be interesting to see what unfolds, but I'm definitely excited to get back in the fall.
So you're excited to go in person?
Yes.
Yes. And how do your parents feel about this?
Well, I mean, I don't want to speak for them, but I'd hope that they're sad that I'm leaving. But I think that, I mean, they're very comfortable with me coming back because they know how much I love the school, and they know how much in-person instruction matters to me in my learning style. So I think they're happy. I don't think they have any reservations about me going back because we're going to have health checks every day, and we're hopeful that things will be all right.
Got it. Well, we'll be excited to see where that takes you, and hopefully everything will, hopefully it'll be great, and you'll see a lot of your friends back, and you'll feel back to normal. So, Lydia, what about you? Are you going back, or what does this fall look like for you? Oh, we're getting echo. Okay, let's try Noah. Noah, maybe you could tell us about sort of your fall this year.
So I have a guaranteed spot at DePaul in the fall. So I'm going to be going to DePaul University in Chicago, and I have a guaranteed spot there. So I know that on campus there is a spot for me. And then what DePaul has been telling incoming students is that they're changing effectively how they've set up their dorms. So there will be less people in the dorms, more cleaning staff, more daily cleaning. But I haven't even been to college yet. So I just graduated high school. So I really don't know what exactly to expect. All I know is I have a spot, and that because of COVID, they're taking extra precautions to make sure that everybody is safe once they're on campus.
Right, right. And so are you excited, or are you a little nervous, or like, no, how are you feeling since this is like your first year?
I'm really excited. So, I mean, it's a lot of big changes. So I just graduated from a small private high school. So it was about 350 students maximum. And I'm about to go to a very large school in a large city. So that'll be new as far as learning and just learning with a lot more people involved. I'm used to a very personalized learning environment, but that's also something that attracted me to DePaul, because even though it will be bigger, there is a dedication to making sure there's personalized learning, and that as you get more in depth in your field, that you'll have smaller class sizes. So overall, I'm really excited, but it's also a big change. There are a lot of big differences.
It is a big change. Are you going to be able to continue to draw? Because I know you are definitely my creative friend here. And I know you were very passionate about this the last time we spoke. Is that sort of the things that you're looking forward to starting your next year?
Yes, definitely. So my major is animation, and then I will also have a minor in PR and advertising, but I definitely do want to continue my love for art and animation. It's really, if you think about things in progression and how over time things get more technologically advanced, animation is kind of the answer to that, with just regular 2D drawing. It's a form of media that I have just fallen in love with. So I am so happy that that is something that I can study and perfect, because it's still art, but I will be learning something new because there are new technologies involved, and it's just advancing a passion I have and hoping to turn it into a career.
Well, I hope so. Sounds pretty fun. It'll be interesting to see how you adjust to dorm life, Noah, and then like all these people wanting to talk to you and everything else in this COVID world. So Lydia, let's talk. Lydia, I mean, what's fall going to look like for you? Where are we going? And going back to Spelman, and what are you looking forward to? Or have you decided to do distance learning? Where are you at?
So Spelman hasn't released their official plan yet, but likely it'll be all students remote learning, or some students returning to campus. So I will likely be spending the fall of my senior year in my high school bedroom. So, I mean, I am a very cautious person, and I think that for me, college is really about the proximity. It's not college without the random conversations with classmates and professors after class. It's not college without being able to see people randomly in the caf and have amazing conversations. And so without that, it doesn't feel like college to me. So even though I'm really sad not to be at Spelman for my final year, part of my final year, I'm going to try to make the most of it.
Well, good. So interesting. So 3 different opinions. And actually, Lydia and Noah, as we mentioned before, are actually siblings. So such a different in perspective. It's fascinating. You know, I think there's a lot of talk about how education is going to be so different, but more importantly, how job opportunities are going to be different for that next generation, namely Generation Z, who we're talking to today. Three different experts who are in Generation Z. Talk about your jobs, your internship. There's a lot of talk about being concerned about future income thanks to the COVID and the pandemic, and things are changing. Are you concerned, Quinn? Is this something that you've thought about?
Yes, it is certainly something I've thought about, especially because my major is not a quote unquote vocational major. You can, like, there's a wide variety of what you can do with it. It's not really a straight shot into a particular job. So that's definitely been a bit concerning for me. But because I'm a rising sophomore, I haven't thought too much about like what job I'm going to get. It's more internship opportunities over the summer and breaks. And something Notre Dame offers is an ISSLP, which is an International Summer Service Learning Program. And all of them obviously got canceled this year. So the students who were signed up for them this summer are going to get priority for next summer. So that'll definitely make the application pool much more difficult. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now, and I'm definitely concerned.
Definitely concerned. Well, Lydia, what about you? I mean, you're staying at home, so last year is going to be at home. Are you looking towards job opportunities now? Are you thinking about internships? Where are you at?
Yeah, so I was really lucky to still have an internship this summer. Safe to Work is amazing. It's really amazing being able to see how a nonprofit tackles the technology part of COVID-19 and figuring out ways to protect lives and livelihoods while also reopening the economy. And so I am really excited about that, and it's been an amazing opportunity. But job searching for next year and post-grad has definitely been on my mind. And I think that as soon as I realized that I was going to be graduating, not into the kind of rosy job market of January 2020, but into some version of a pandemic job market, I started reading articles and advice from people who had graduated in the Great Recession. And I really took their advice to heart, which was to be flexible, do things that you wouldn't have expected for yourself, be really comfortable with life takes you. So instead of focusing on one plan, I've been focusing on being okay and navigating uncertainty and insecurity in a really nebulous situation, whatever that might be.
Lydia, I feel like parents all over watching you right now want to hug you, just hearing you say this, because you're right. It's all about being flexible. Well, let me ask you this, Lydia, since, you've been through this pandemic as long as all of us have, really. So when you're looking for that next job or that next employer, what are you looking for? What priorities do you think would attract someone of your caliber? What would make a job go, wow, this is somewhere I would really love to work at?
I think that this pandemic has really drawn into focus like what ethical business looks like or what it could look like, and imagining where we go from here. And I really love the concept of businesses being responsible to not just their shareholders, but all of their stakeholders. So, their employees, their customers, communities that they're seated in, and their shareholders. And so in the future, I'm really deeply committed to going to work at an ethical company, not ethical necessarily because it participates in some version of social justice, although I do want to go into policy, so likely I will be on some intersection of social justice and policy. But in general, just a business that understands that its responsibility is more than a profit margin.
Well, there's been some encouragement from some of our viewers that they think that you should get into video because you're so good on video. So maybe that's something for you to think about. Noah, what about you? You're getting into your first year of college. Are you already thinking about work? I mean, obviously you're going to be, we talked about this last time, you're probably going to be working at Disney or Pixar or DreamWorks or something amazing like that, right? But has this experience made you concerned? Are you concerned about work? Do you feel like it's going to be more competitive by the time you're looking for work? Do you have any plans to maybe get an internship or job while you're just starting on college now?
So these are all lots of concerns I'm thinking about. And so the big thing for me and the big thing for my parents, which is why it was emphasized for me, was employability. So I was going into I'm going into an art field. And so way earlier, so around like freshman year, 8th grade, when I said, hey, I want to do art like as a career, it was a big cause of concern and worry from my parents because they were like, well, artists, we see a trend that artists, or not necessarily a trend, but the stereotype around artists is that they don't get jobs, and this whole starving artist stereotype. And they didn't want me to be that. So I have always been thinking about employability and will I be able to get a job? And so with the animation business, a big thing about it is connection. So yes, you should have some innate skill, but building connections around the industry, you getting to know people, that's essentially how you get your foot in the door. So for me, paying attention to things like internships and just opportunities to meet people and network, those have been really big. And those are the opportunities I don't want to miss out on because they could lead me to my next job. So that's the big thing I've been thinking about, and how competitive those things will be and how hard they will be to get into, because I have to pay attention to that. Because if it's connections industry, well, then I have to look for where can I make these connections and how will that change now because of COVID. But another big thing that I, as an artist, and I think a lot of artists have had to come to terms with, is that sometimes you won't always be able to find those connections, and you have to find a way to make income aside from that until you do. So a lot of artists have side hustles or something that they do that, well, I'm not only getting money from being employed for this company, I'm making money for myself. So like currently right now, I have a Patreon. And Patreon, if you know anything about it, it's basically set up for if you provide a good or service and people like your good or service, they can choose to give you money on a monthly or on a one-time basis and basically say, I like what you're doing and I support you. So right now, that is a way I've been making money.
Oh, wonderful. And your Patreon then, Noah, are you sharing your art?
Yes. So I'm currently sharing my art on Patreon, and it's a lot of finished pieces. But the really cool thing about Patreon is it's directed for like user and creator engagement. So it's not just people wanting to see finished pieces, but in the process, updating people on what you're doing. They're making the choice to give you money because they like what you do, but they also need content. So Patreon is a very content-driven platform where you're producing it, and as long as people like it, it's something you can make money off of.
Very cool, very cool. And I love that concept. Quinn, let's talk about that. Quinn, side hustle to your side hustle. This seems like a very popular trend, especially with millennials, and definitely we've heard now with Gen Z. Have you thought about that? I mean, like, I personally have a side hustle to my side hustle to my side hustle. Is that just something that's going to be normal for you? That you see you and your friends, are you thinking this is normal, or do you think like, oh my gosh, there's so much work?
I would definitely say that one thing that I've really seen across the board is that we as an age group try to find money in mundane jobs, kind of like I have a lot of friends who sell their old clothes, or they sell like items that they have, or people babysit, or people car wash, or you can like sign up for delivery dudes super easily and deliver food to houses. So there are definitely a lot of small jobs that a lot of people in our generation, I think, pick up as a way to make cash.
And so millennials, Gen Zers are definitely very scrappy. So I think that's going to be very refreshing, because I think that was one of the things we've heard a lot of employers talked about previously, pre-versus pandemic, when they're hiring millennials. They found that some millennials, although they were great savers, they also had a lot of wants and needs from their employers. And sometimes employers found some of the millennials hard to keep on their payroll because they sort of lacked some of the work ethic that maybe previous generations did. So it almost sounds like it's kind of going a little bit full circle from what I've heard from Lydia and Noah and Quinn today. It sounds like you said, you're willing to be flexible, right? We heard that from Lydia, that you're willing to be flexible, you're learning, and you're studying. Not only Lydia studied and looked into what people did during the Depression, and then now you're going through the pandemic, right? Maybe let me ask you this. So having gone through this pandemic, if you could turn back time, if you could turn back to March or even February or even January, December, what would you have done? What's one thing you would have done to prepare for right now? I love to hear, I'd love to start with Lydia on this. If you could tell me, is there something you would have done differently? Was there something you would have bought, something you would have learned, like if you could have turned back time?
I'm afraid I have a deeply sappy answer. I would have spent more time with my friends. I spent fall of 2019 abroad in Paris, and it was amazing. It was the best decision of my life. But it also means that my sophomore year homecoming will be my last homecoming as an undergraduate. It means that I didn't get to spend a lot of time with my friends, and my junior year kind of got cut short. So my Spelman friends kind of got the short thrift. And so the thing that I miss most right now is all the memories that I know I'd be making during senior year and during this summer that I won't be. And so I would just make a whole bunch more of those memories to tide me over until I could see my friends again.
That is sappy, Lydia, but I kind of love it. All right. Let's go to Quinn next. Quinn, what about you? What is something that you would change if you could turn back time?
In all honesty, I have a very similar answer to Lydia. And I don't think I was grateful enough for that time I had. So I certainly believe that after this pandemic is over, I'm going to be living differently and interacting differently. And I think that's a really big positive that can come out of all of this chaos. I think not even as a generation, but as a people, I think we're going to pay much closer attention to the things that really matter. And I think we now recognize that a lot can be taken away very quickly. So yeah, that's what I think.
I love that. I love that. All right, Noah, your turn. What about you, buddy?
For me, the big thing is organization. So I do want to tack on to what the two just said before me, which is I really would want to establish those connections with my friends and hang out more and just be more present within that, because I think that was a big thing. And then I got into the pandemic and we were at home and I was like, I need to see my friends. Like, I was itching at it. And so I wish I would have linked up with people more. But a big thing for me, just going into college, being in high school, organization is not my strong suit. And so when switching to completely online learning, you would think that it would be a bit easier because you don't have to leave your house. You're not having to keep track of physical assignments because a lot of the stuff is online. So I thought that it would be fine and I would be fine and that it would be really easy to make that switch. But it wasn't. I had a lot of responsibilities still going on at the time. And now everything's online. So making sure that I'm keeping track of all my emails and everything I need to be on top of. And that got really difficult for me. And so it's just something I have to pay attention to with managing how everything for myself is set up and just making sure that I'm on top of things. So the pandemic was an eye opener for me, basically. And so moving forward, and if I could have gone back, just making sure that beforehand that everything is where it needs to be and I'm not behind on stuff, or I'm not missing stuff, or I'm looking everywhere. It's just distinct.
See, no, I'm really fascinated to hear you say that, and I thank you for your honesty about organization. You and I had a chat last year, right around back to school shopping during that time, and I remember you saying that I would go to the art store and I would buy supplies when it was on sale and this and that. And so I was expecting you to say something like, Winnie, I probably would have bought more art supplies to do more of my craft or something like that. So really fascinating. But I love how all three of you emphasize, number one, the importance of having more human contact, right? And Noah certainly figured out an area of himself that he wanted to change. And I think all of us feel this way, having gone through, if you think about it, like we're in June right now. March was a long time, but it wasn't like so long ago. We're not talking years ago. We're talking months, weeks ago, right? And yet how much we have learned in this amount of time, essentially from home and spending more time with ourselves. Right. And so what I love is that you have all three shared the importance of relationships. And also Quinn said it several times. And I love that. She says, I'm just so much more grateful now of and really having a better understanding of the importance. And maybe in some ways that is a lesson that we needed to learn, right? Because technology was pushing us so quickly, so far ahead that sometimes we didn't really get a chance to slow down. So Quinn, was that sort of challenging when this first hit and you had to slow down essentially? How did you cope?
Oh, that's a really good question. So for me personally, I really like being busy. Like, I like having multiple things on my docket. I like knowing what I'm going to do in a day, and to suddenly just wake up in my bed and know exactly how the day is going to play out. I'm going to go to my Zoom class for an hour and a half, and then I'm going to get lunch, and then I'm going to go to my other Zoom class for an hour and a half, and then I'm just going to work. Like, there was no variety, I guess. There was no excitement. There was no waking up and not necessarily knowing what was going to happen in the day, I guess. But it was definitely a difficult transition, but I did acclimate, because I think that's something so great about our generation. We acclimate. And like Lydia said, we're flexible. So I think we adapted well.
I think this is really Quinn, you're giving us a lot of hope right now. I feel really good about your generation. Lydia, it's interesting because Quinn, we know, is going back to Notre Dame, and she's looking forward to it. She's going to jump on a plane in July, right, Quinn?
Yeah.
And so her world is going to change. She's going to go back to seeing her friends in person. But Lydia, you've made a conscious decision not to do that, right? So for you, you've decided to stay home and continue to do this. Tell me a little bit why, because I think it's really, really interesting. And I think we need to know this as business owners and employers. Why? And then second part of the question, Lydia, because I'm going to throw a second question at you. I want to hear from you. There's been a lot of talk that more companies need to create environments where their employees can really work more from home and more remotely. If you had a choice, like would you want to continue to have that option? Would you rather have a hybrid option? Like, what does the ideal sort of workplace look for you personally?
Yeah. So on the first front, part of it isn't my decision. Part of it is someone deciding not to go back. So part of it was out of my hands. And so my choice hasn't been so much not going back, but dealing with that reality and being flexible. But I think even if I did have the choice to go back, and I may, depending on what Spelman chooses, I'd still want to stay home. Because I think that we have just vastly underestimated as a nation what this pandemic is going to look like in the fall. And I understand it because I am also wary of wearing masks. I am also wary of not seeing my friends, and every grocery store run being kind of a bit of a panic moment. But I think that for the sake of the vulnerable people in our communities and for my generation and the next generation, we're going to have to stay the course. And that means social distancing when that's not fun. So on the first front, it's really more of a mindset choice than a decision. But on the second, I am not a fan of working from home at all. I think space-based work is really important. And so what I worry about is a couple of things. I worry about cities, which are these places of incredible social and cultural capital that young people flock to really rebuild their lives in their 20s, from, what it was in adolescence to what they want it to be, to what their vision of adulthood is. And so I worry that if cities change and if companies drop back from cities, if companies say you can work from home, then cities won't be that vibrant engine of not just economic growth, but of culture and social networks. And that I think is going to hurt Gen Z the most. But I'm also worried that we're learning the wrong lessons from this pandemic, because I think for some, working from home is going to be really empowering. But I don't want us to look at like a mother who finds working from home empowering because she doesn't have to commute 3 hours to get to that crowded city in California that she works in but can't afford to live in. I don't think the lesson there is that working from home is great. I think the lesson is we need to build more affordable housing in big cities. And so my hope is that companies will recognize that things like creativity and teamwork cannot be replaced over a computer. And that while a lot more flexibility is needed and the office is going to look different, having that human interaction and part of your week, if that's 3 days, 4 days, is still really, really important. And I would prefer to be in a city, and I would prefer to be in an office maybe 2 to 4 days a week, and have the option to work from home when it's more convenient and more productive, but not always.
Not always. You still want to have that option of being with people, which is really good to hear, because I think a lot of us who are business owners and sort of planning the future for our businesses, for our employees and our clients, right? We want to create an environment that's viable not only today, but into the future. And knowing that now 2 of the 3 Gen Zers that we've just asked prefer that inhuman contact, I think is also giving people some relief, especially those of you who own commercial real estate and are concerned of whether or not, things are going to go back to normal and people are going to go back into work. No, I know that you're just starting college right now, so talk to me about this. I mean, they have a spot for you. School's going to go, you're going from a smaller environment to a very large environment with a lot of different people, right? What are some precautions that you're kind of taking, and you talked about wanting to make sure that you're more organized now. So you got Lydia at home, so this is pretty awesome. I'm sure you have a powerhouse in terms of organization here. You probably talked about this with your family as well. what are some things that you're sort of preparing to make sure that your first year experience is all that you want it to be?
Just being ahead of the game, I'd say, is the biggest thing to pay attention to. So like finding important dates, like when I have my orientation. So there's like a 3-hour long online orientation that I'll have in mid-July, and then I'll have my orientation with my advisor where I'll set up all my classes, being on top of, well, when is the actual matriculation onto campus, and setting up like in the dorm. So like what items can I bring with me? I think I don't think roommates will be a thing this year. I think they're having people like one person to a dorm room now, or
how nice.
The dorm hall. I know the dorm halls will definitely have less people. So also just figuring out how to set up your room, how to stay safe, making sure you have a mask. Like about week two into the pandemic, our whole family had our own multi-use masks. So making sure that you just have these things that set you up to live in a new normal. And I think that's also a big thing, regardless of COVID or not. Moving to college, especially when you're moving out of state to somewhere new, that's always going to be a new normal. And you always have to figure out, well, what do I need to make sure that I'm set up for success or prepared to transfer into this new environment? So it's still making sure we have those things, but with some extra specification.
Yeah, no, I think like you're going to have a great time. And it sounds like you're thinking ahead. And I don't know, you said you weren't organized, but you actually sound pretty organized to me right now. So that is exciting. Maybe Lydia's rubbing off on you. Let's talk about e-learning a little bit. We talked about work. We talked about the importance of still having those in-person relationships. Talk to me, Quinn, a little bit about what your experience has been with e-learning. Where do you think e-learning is where it needs to be right now? Do you think there's definitely areas that need improvement? And if you had a magic wand and you could change e-learning, how would you change it so it'd be, more interesting to you, more helpful in your learning career?
Well, one thing I think that was really tricky with the situation is that we were literally just thrown into it, like instructors and students alike. So we really had to adapt and figure out what was going to work. And so obviously along the way, there were mishaps that happened. Technological difficulties are always an issue. But the majority of my classes are seminars. Like we sit and we talk about books or readings, that sort of thing. So it actually those classes transitioned fairly well because we were still able to voice our opinions just on Zoom. But then my lectures were much different because teachers were posting the PowerPoints online, and then they would videotape themselves talking and presenting the lecture. So it was 100% more difficult to stay focused and to be as organized and attentive as I would be at school in a physical classroom. So I definitely had to learn how to kind of create my own schedule and figure out what worked best for me. But one thing I did see is that with all the extra time, I paid much closer attention to my assignments, and I completed them more diligently, and I ended up getting better grades on them because there were no distractions. There were no outside distractions. You just had to do your work. But I guess as for what could change or what could be done better, I think it needs to be recognized that everybody does not have access to the same opportunities or the same benefits that online teaching could bring. I had some classmates who had to go to a bathroom and work in a bathroom because that was where the best internet was in their house, or people would break in and out of class just because of their internet connection. So I don't know what exactly universities could do to better that. I don't really have an answer. But I think recognizing that is certainly a problem and adapting some way of instruction to accommodate those disparities.
I love that you say that. And I feel like Lydia can definitely help us out here. Lydia, you've probably given this some thought. Obviously, not only when students had to transition home, not only then did their learning change, right? Their interactions with their professors change, but some people also lost their housing and their food, right? And so many other resources that you take for granted when you're in college, or even if you're even in like, in elementary school and high school. Have you thought about that a little bit? And I know it's not perfect, and I don't expect you to come up with an answer on how we can solve it. But what do you think some opportunities might be? Do you feel like if you could talk to leadership, right, and say these are things that you should be paying attention to because they're really important to the next generation? Lydia, help us out.
Yeah, so this semester, Spelman instituted a pass-fail policy where any student could choose to do a pass-fail in any of their classes or all of their classes instead of having a letter grade. And that was meant to address the fact that people did have different access to healthy living situations, basic things like Wi-Fi, technology, a safe and easy environment to learn in and work in. And so I think that the fact that Spelman took that measure was great. And I think that what the next step is realizing that even though on a college campus, some of those things are alleviated, nobody is ever really on the same playing field. A lot of those students who are having those difficulties when they go back home, they have other stressors and other things on their plate when they're at school too. Like there's a big difference between I who works because in my campus writing center because I enjoy tutoring and it's fun for me and having pocket money is cool, and somebody who works to pay their tuition. Like those are two very different paradigms. And so maybe this will spur a recognition that the metrics that we're using to evaluate success are not holistic and don't acknowledge all the ways that people's experiences and grades and classes are shaped by where they come from, not just the college environment. And so I really hope that it will contribute to colleges working harder to create a level playing field and to change the metrics of success that we use.
I love that. Lydia, I knew you wouldn't let me down. I love that. All right. No, this is a good question. And I think I'm going to have you lead on this because we actually touched on this a little bit last year when we chatted. Let's talk about marketing, talking about businesses and talking about brands, right? And we talked about how they position themselves to be able to truly be authentic. And you had mentioned before that sort of things have to be authentic. I remember you saying that you like to touch and feel, make sure things are of good quality and you're being smart about how you spend your money and how you make consumer decisions, right? Which is so important because being that Gen Z is that next generation, you are going to be making so many of the important financial decisions for not only yourself, but eventually also for your parents and other family members too. Talk about to me right now about how brands are talking about COVID and talking about first responders as well as Black Lives Matter. Do you find it authentic? Do you feel like what they're saying resonates, or do you think that there's still a lot of ways to go?
Unfortunately, I think we have a long ways to go. I think, well, if we return back to when the pandemic first started, all the media coverage was surrounding COVID and COVID-19, and it was literally all we heard about on the news. And so within that time frame, within that span, we had a lot of companies saying, well, this is our commitment to keeping our communities safe and healthy and whatnot. And then especially a lot of technological companies saying, well, we are what's going to connect you as we have to stay at home. So that's sort of the advertising and marketing that dominated the conversation. And then recently, after the death of George Floyd and a reignition to the Black Lives Matter movement, we've seen a lot of companies come out and say, we stand in solidarity with the Black community. We're going to pledge this much money to the Black community and whatnot. But what the trend I'm trying to highlight is when the media is oversaturated by one thing, that's sort of when companies decide to come out and say, well, we stand in solidarity, or we are with you as this is happening, and this is what we're going to do to essentially like support you. But it also rings hollow a lot of the time because they say they're going to do something and then there's no actual action. We've seen that change a bit with what's happened after the aftermath of George Floyd, where companies are saying, not only do we stand in solidarity with Black people and the Black Lives Matter movement, but here's how we're going to be using our money and time and how we're going to dedicate it to those issues. And while I'm glad they're saying that, and now they're putting their money where their mouth is, essentially, I want to see what happens in 10 years. Mm-hmm. In 10 years, are we still going to go month to month where I hear another story about an innocent Black person dying because of police brutality? And if that happens again, so not only do I not want to be hearing those stories again, but if they do happen again, did those companies actually stick to the pledges they said they were going to do? Or when the media essentially stopped putting pressure on these issues, where, well, then did they switch to, well, now because not everybody else is talking about it, we can quietly slip away from it?
Interesting. Yeah, really, really grateful that you shared that, Noah. So Quinn, talk to me about this. What are your your thoughts? So you've been seeing a lot of brands talk about, COVID and first responders, as well as Black Lives Matter too. Do you feel like when you're seeing these brands, do you feel like it's authentic? Where do you think lies opportunities to be better, so that Gen Z perhaps is the leadership group that we can look forward to? What do you think that we need to see more of right now?
Well, so briefly on the first half of that question, what I started doing is I started looking at the companies who were coming out with these statements and seeing who was on their board. And I was really horrified to see that there was very little diversity. And if there was, it was usually one Black person as the head of diversity and inclusion or something like that. So like Noah was saying, money wasn't really where their mouth was. So I think that our generation entering the workforce, being so aware of the social injustices in this world, we are going to be truly committed to making a difference. And when we get up to that possible position of being a director of a company or something like that, we are going to be much more committed to diversifying boards and being way more concrete about our missions and following through with what we say. It's not just going to be a media stunt. I'm very hopeful that we will truly be committed to creating that change, because I think in a lot of ways we are that change.
Yeah, I love that, Quinn. I think, maybe that's one of the silver linings of us having to go through this experience is we're learning, we're seeing. And most importantly, Quinn, you talked about this, and Lydia, you talked about this too. And I know Noah, you as well, is that, I think what we've learned is Gen Z will do their research. Like Quinn's talked about how she looked at boards, right? Lydia's done so much research in different ways too. So you're not just going to take things for granted based on what's being presented to you. So Lydia, talk to me, if you had your way, if for some reason the leadership that's running this country right now said, Lydia, we want you to come and tell us what you think. What are some areas that we can improve on? What are some areas that you think are opportunities that we can get better at?
Yeah, so I think that first and foremost, I think politics is downstream of culture. So if you want to change politics, if you want to change policy, you have to change culture. And I think the good thing maybe about COVID-19 and the aftermath of the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery is that we are being called to ask, what does it mean to be a moral individual? What does that actually mean? Not just in times of crisis, whether moral or material, but in our everyday lives. I think we're watching, as we watch essential workers who have for so long been underpaid and undervalued and just not respected, we've seen that they are actually kind of the backbone of our society, that we are not only deeply interdependent, but also really reliant on these professions that we often don't respect. And so I'm hopeful that we will come out of this pandemic with a different understanding of what we owe each other as in our interpersonal relationships, in our communities, as Americans, and as global citizens. As for talking to the leadership of this country right now, there's a lot. There's a lot we could do. I think for me, I'm really concerned about repeating the mistake of the Great Recession where we didn't do enough fast enough. And so if there's like one concrete policy choice I could tell the administration right now, it's to get money out the door to a couple of people, to small businesses. I love eating. I really need all of my restaurants to be here after this ends. I need you to get money out the door to small businesses. I need you to get it to local and state governments, because if in the fall, when these budget cuts hit, we are also trying to put more distance in between school children, and we have another surge of COVID. Like, we're going to need more public officials. We're going to need more teachers. We can't cut those budgets. It's not going to work. And then, extend the bonus UI. That is something that has really minimized the economic pain the economy is feeling right now. And when it runs out, I'm really, really worried about the millions of jobs that aren't coming back and that are going to ultimately be just eliminated because of COVID. And then get money out the door to families. This is a big economy. It's like 20 something trillion a year. You don't spend a lot of time debating like how much water you're putting on a $21 trillion fire. You just put it out. And so like worrying about the debt, which I do because that's on our generation and the next generation to fix. That's not the concern right now. Just get money out the door, and make sure that people have lives to come back to. And also listen to our public health officials. Get money out the door, and please listen to the public health officials.
I love that, Lydia. I mean, I hope one day you run for Treasury Secretary. One day, that would be a beautiful thing. And certainly, Noah, this is probably something you've talked about too. Let me ask you this. We see a lot of Americans right now debating on the topic of wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. A lot of people feel like they shouldn't wear a mask. What are your thoughts, Noah? Which team are you on?
Team wear a mask all day, every day. So, and I'll admit, there will be times where I've been out in public recently where I'm like, oh, did I forget my mask? Well, I'll be fine. And it's rewiring myself to be like, no, you can't forget your mask when you're leaving the house. And it's not just, oh, I'll be fine. Me as a teenager who is healthy and doesn't have a pre-existing condition, well, other than asthma, but which has been very managed, I am not as much at risk for COVID-19 as other people. So so for me, going out, it's safer for me purely because I am not in an at-risk group. It doesn't mean there are people there aren't people around me who aren't in at-risk groups. Like, my dad is in an at-risk group. So thinking about that, even if you're not going to wear the mask for your own personal health and safety, wear it for other people's personal health and safety. And if every doctor around the world is telling you wear a mask, there are medical professionals who have spent their entire lives training to be prepared for these kinds of things and to inform the public on them. If all of them are telling you to wear a mask, why is that so hard? Does your own breath smell, and that when you breathe and it reflects back into you, does it smell bad? Maybe you should brush your teeth. You don't like how it looks and it doesn't match your outfit. Well, people are making custom masks. Go out and buy one that matches your outfit. It should not be so hard and so difficult to wear an extra article of clothing to keep yourself and everyone else safe. And so the fact that there is even a team mask and team no mask is ridiculous to me.
Thank you, Noah. Quinn, Lydia, agree, disagree?
Yeah, well, I think a really common argument on the other side is that people don't want to give up their personal freedoms. However, I think there comes a point where some personal freedoms have to be given up to help the greater good. I've been kind of upset to see the selfishness plaguing so much of society. Like, people are complaining about putting a covering on their mouth. Like, I can't really wrap my head around it. I don't really understand why people can't just do that to help other people out. I am 100% on team wear a mask. It's really not that much of a hassle. I think people are just getting upset that others are telling them what they need to do. And I think that especially at this time in our country, we need to listen to the people who know what they're talking about, like Noah was talking about, and just wear a mask.
just wear a mask. I know. I mean, look at this. Like teenagers, young people are okay with you telling them to wear a mask. Lydia, talk to me.
Yeah, I would say like this is exactly what I was saying earlier. Like this is what we owe each other. And I mean, we know that like masks are primarily to protect other people. They're primarily to protect transmission when you're breathing and speaking in public. And so I think this really just we're always interdependent. Like that's a truism always. But this has really highlighted the ways that we are interdependent when you not wearing a mask could be the death of someone's mother, grandfather, son, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that when you recognize that in all of this chaos and uncertainty, you have a responsibility, but also just an ability to actually make a difference in the lives of other people, to take back some modicum of control. If people think about it like that, then that might be like a more attractive framing than the government is telling me what to do. Like I'm really sympathetic to like libertarian strains of discourse, just not when it comes to public health. So this is what we owe each other.
I love it. I love it. Well, you three have been incredible. I feel so incredibly, I'm going to use the word that all of you have used, the word grateful. I've been so grateful for the time that you've shared. And I got to say that I've learned so much from you. And I hope those of you, I want to thank everybody. So many people joined us today. I see all your comments. I appreciate you so much. But most importantly, the three of you give me a lot of hope. That the next generation is going to be better. I have a very, very young Gen Zer. I think my 11-year-old, I think he's officially a Gen Zer, but you give me a lot of hope. And I hope those of you who are watching, you feel a little bit better about tomorrow too, because we've got leaders like this three leading us. I think we'll be pretty okay. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. I want to say a huge thank you to Lydia, Noah, and Quinn for joining us today. And please do follow them. We will definitely share all their handles. They are very much active on Instagram, right? From what we saw earlier. And so we'll definitely follow you. And we definitely want to keep track and let us know how else we can support you. Noah, please do share your Patreon account with us so we can share that loud and wide with all our friends here. But thank you so much. You have given us just so many great things to think about. And this discussion will sit with me for quite a long time. So thank you.
Thanks. I mean, that was great for me. I don't know what's for you guys, but that was great.
No, I loved it. Such a good conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm happy to be included.
Well, Noah, I feel like you're just like my regular now. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for everybody for tuning in. And we will see you live again tomorrow. Take care now. Bye-bye.